you're fine. Did your day take you through changes and mess up your mind? I'm just calling you to say that I'm on my way. So I will see you when I get there. I will see you when I get there. And you be ready for good love.
Hi, I'm Kev Roberts, the host of Northern Soul Time. Tom, our main man. Was that okay?
Who is Kev Roberts? Give us a little bit about your background, where you're from.
Well, I was born in Wirksworth in Derbyshire, a small little market town. Actually, it's more of a festival town these days. And we then moved to a larger town, Sutton in Ashfield in Notts, which kind of was almost twinned with Mansfield, the Ashfield area of Kirkby and Ashfield, Sutton in Ashfield and Mansfield, quite a big conurbation. And it's when I went to school in Mansfield that I really started to take note of music. So I used to listen to Pick of the Pops on the old Light programme, which of course today became Radio 2. This incredible, fast-talking Australian guy called Alan Freeman came on with Pick of the Pops.
Greetings, pop pickers. It's me again, Alan Freeman, and Sunday at 4 means Pick of the Pops.
And what happened was, after about 6 months of listening to it, I used to write the chart out every week. And then the following week, as he was counting down the chart, I'd be rubbing them out very quickly and writing them in. So I became fascinated with the pop charts. So really that's how I got into music. I started to buy records seriously from about 12 years old. And of course, in a big town like Mansfield, and subsequently 15 miles away, of course, was Nottingham, which is a huge city. It didn't take long before I was scouring markets and bric-a-brac and, you know, sales and exchange and all these other kind of things that were happening at that time. So you could find records, very good records. I must stress, though, I was buying pop as well as soul, though, because I didn't really know any different. I love the Marmalade, Loving Things. It's just Junior Campbell on lead vocal. That, you know, sends me in a spin even today. Every night I was listening to Tony Prince on Radio Luxembourg, Bob Stewart.
Radio Luxembourg, Tony Prince.
Can you dig it? It's 8 minutes after 11 on Radio Luxembourg. Stand by for my favorite record out of tonight's Top 30 in just a moment.
I was a big Luxie fan, more than I was Radio 1. When I got to 15, my record box was pretty good by then. Still nothing to write home about, but the records were very, very good in there, in the box. And I used to carry the box around. I was a late starter with girls, I might add. I started as a DJ by default. I, again, took my records on a bus one night from Sutton in Ashfield to Nottingham. And a friend of mine had taken me a few weeks earlier to the Britannia Club in Trent Bridge. Now, Trent Bridge in Nottingham was a very, very trendy and happening spot. It lies on the River Trent to this day, 3 boat clubs. There was the Union, which played rock music, the Boat Club played top 40, and the Brit played soul and mod. And next door to those 3 boat clubs was the famous city ground of Nottingham Forest FC. So anybody that is listening and watching this and supports Nottingham Forest will know exactly what I'm talking about. So I started to go to the Brit, as it was known, without my friend, because he couldn't always get there. He was a couple of years older, so he could drive. So I took a bus one night and took my box with me. Not for any purpose of being a DJ. I'd never been a DJ before. But this one night, the manager had seen me there, and I used to get there very early. I wasn't drinking. at all. I mean, I shouldn't have even been in the club, but I was strictly a Coca-Cola man back in those days. And what happened was I stood there with my box. The manager came over to me, he said, "Are they records in that box?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Are you a DJ?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Only I'm looking for a DJ tonight, but I don't know if the regular guy's going to show. It's supposed to be doing his last night here before he moves to another venue." And I said, "Okay." He came back about 5 minutes later. He said, no, he's not going to show. Clearly they had some kind of a fallout or whatever. And they needed a DJ. So I had the right records. Strangely enough, I often think back to that particular night, and there's not many of those records today that you ever hear, which is really odd, because when you get to a certain age, you look back through your nostalgic box, not my play box today, I might add, and you think to yourself, why don't they play I'm Satisfied by the San Remo Golden Strings? Why don't they play Get Ready for Love by Paintbox on, Youngblood and things like that? These were part of the world back then. But I did have enough I'm Gonna Run Away From You, Tammy Lynn's, and enough to get girls dancing. And so that was my audition, 8 till 11, 3 hours. Yeah, I had to literally race to get the last bus home. 10 minutes to 12 from Nottingham bus station to the Victoria Centre. He gave me some money, which was great, and a week later offered me Friday, Saturday and Sunday. So my link to a bigger stage came via a chance meeting with a record dealer, a guy who's gone on to become very famous within the music world, discovering the band Shalimar, and also his involvement with the movie Thank God It's Friday, Simon Soussan, who was on a night out with one of the directors of Selector Disc called John Bratton. And John brought him down to the Brick Club. And who's the DJ? Moi. So he came up to me, looked through my box, and marched off with a pile of singles. Nothing too rare, I might add, but he walked off mainly with English singles. And I always remember one of them was Let's Copper Groove by Bobby Wells on Beacon. So he took them, and I looked round and I was sort of speechless, really, because you imagine how young I was. First of all, John was a lot older than me, and certainly Simon was older than me. So there he is on a night out. Clearly he's there to develop his relationship with Selector Disc and their record company, Black Magic. Took some records, came back about 20 minutes later with a pile for me. And he said, "There you go, baby boy," because he always called me baby boy. I've progressed now to Brother Kev, bless him, but I was baby boy back then. And he brought in some records. I looked through them and they looked mightily rare, but I didn't know them. And in that pile was Something Got a Hold on Me by Jeanette Williams, Take Away the Pain Stain by Patty Austin, Ain't Nobody's Business by Ernie Marbray, and records of that ilk, quite rare. So I took them home. I just let the moment slide. I thought I was a bit peeved, to say the least, because I thought, oh, Let's Copper Groove, I'm going to have to find £1 to buy that back, not realising, of course, that Jeanette Williams, would have been £30 in the box. So I did good. On September the 23rd, we went on a minibus to Blackpool Mecca. That was the same night the Wigan Casino opened, but we didn't go there for reasons I don't know to this day. But we went to the Mecca and I walked in with my box. So what I did, I spent the whole evening shuffling towards Ian Levine. And eventually he turned around and said, "Can I have a look through that box?" And I thought, yes, finally. So I thought, well, this has got to be the best critique, because you're talking about one of the biggest record finders, most knowledgeable people, and one of the hottest spinners of rare soul in the summer of '73. So he went through my box, and I distinctly remember him saying, "You can't have this. I'm the only person with it." So I thought, oh, wow, this is great. Keep talking, keep talking. And it turned out that I got better records than I actually thought from Simon. So now I'm really pumped up. So now I've got the box. We went back to Nottingham. I do the Brit again on the Friday. And then on the Saturday, this time, we're going to Blackpool Mecca first. We're definitely going to Wigan Casino. And the organiser of this minibus was a guy who's no longer with us called Denny Hendy. And Denny came up to me and he said, "Are you enjoying the music in here? Because I'm hearing reissue after reissue. All this stuff's available at Selector Disc. There's nothing really that is going anywhere." So anyway, he got angry and marched up to the organiser, which was Russ Winstanley. And I think gave Russ an earful as a bit of feedback, saying, you know, this is not what's happening. You haven't got the sounds. That was a big phrase back then, by the way. It was as crude as that. Don't like your act, you haven't got the sounds. So Russ very innocently turned around and said, "Show me a man who has." So he went straight back to the Wigan Coke Bar, literally marched me up on stage. There I am with the box again, just hoping that Russ might just want to have a look through it. But he didn't. He just said, "This guy says that you are a good DJ." And literally gave me an audition on the spot. My biggest spin in Nottingham was I'm Gonna Change by the Four Seasons from their Four Seasons New Gold Hits album, which actually wasn't a hit. And I played it. And I thought, and the reasoning behind it was, and I thought, if the crowd on the minibus danced to this, that might, you know, persuade Russ to give me a shot. Well, they did dance to it, and others did too. And then I started with the things that I thought would work, mixed with some things that were popular that I'd managed to obtain, like Betting on Love's Len Jewel. That was quite a hard record to get at the time. I remember saving up quite a bit of money to get that. That mixed with my finds, you know, the Take Away the Pain Stains. I think that was already known, but it was very, very hard to get. I put a set together, got 30 minutes, and as the Americans say, I got the job, Mum. The original DJs were Ian Fishwick, who was support to Russ Winstanley. They hired me as I don't know if I was known as the first outsider, but the first appointment made. And basically that was 3 fairly unknown names. All-nighters generally at that time. I mean, I was too young for the Twisted Wheel, but the Golden Torch were hiring the best in the North. So Wigan Casino didn't go down that road. I think Russ Winstanley, because he was a little older, a little wiser, had thought to himself, crikey, we are onto something big here. I don't think we need anybody. So that's probably why he very astutely appointed young upstarts like me. I first encountered Charly, I think, from the get-go, from 1974. I did like the label and I liked what they were doing. And so they got me hooked and I kept an eye on them. And I just thought they were very good. And then years later, I don't know when, I met this very interesting label manager. I think he was the label manager then, called Joop Visser, who had many tales to tell. I don't think I met Jean-Luc Young, the owner, at that time.
One day, guys walk into my office. There's a big table between us, 2 guys sitting there. One on the left, black curly hair. I didn't even think he spoke English. The one on the right, that was Joop Visser, and he did all the talking.
Joop joined up with Jean-Luc in '74 to create Charly. He'd worked for EMI in Holland, and he was very strong in repertoire, Joop.
He was a crazy fucker, you know. I liked him.
You didn't offer Jean-Luc advice or options without knowing you were going to be grilled on every possible minute detail of whatever it was you're saying. He really pushed you to be the best that you could possibly be.
When I go to a place, I know what I'm dealing with. And if I don't, I'm an idiot. The record business, I don't think is nice sometimes. The majors, those ones are bastards for me.
He's very quiet. He's always a bit in the background. So if you don't talk a lot, if you don't explain a lot, other people make up their own mind. And then there's a lot of stories made up by people who had either bad or good experiences with Charly or Jean-Luc. But that's always a one-sided story. And Jean-Luc never felt the need to defend himself, only in court. And then he wins.
I did respect them and like them and thought they're going to be something. And then, of course, I enjoyed watching Jungle Rock, Hank Mizell on TV. It was a great record anyway, very rare record I might add. And Charly, again, very astute, got to it, saw something in it, and had a hit with it. Just as they did many years later with Nina Simone, My Baby Just Cares for Me.
Back in the 70s, I was known as Jailhouse John of the Wild Wax Show, and as DJs, we were always looking to make any contact with record companies. And when we heard Charly had the Sun catalogue, I contacted them in their little office in Hammersmith. So I said to Yop, I said, come along to the Lyceum, I'll put you up in the balcony, and you watch what happens when we play. I didn't tell him what the record was, because it could have flopped, so I just said, you just sit and watch, see what happens.
I was walking through the jungle just the other night. I heard a big rumble.
The crowd absolutely went crazy, like they did every time he played it. And he said, what is it? So I said, well, it's Jungle Rock by Hank Mizell. And literally within a few weeks, he managed to get the rights to it. And it just took off massively. It got to, what, number 3 in the UK charts, number 1 in the Netherlands. It was that popular. Poor old Hank was in his 50s. He'd almost forgotten that he'd made the record back in 56, I think it was. He was working in a mechanic, and all of a sudden he got this phone call to say that your record's taking off. And it was like, well, what record? As well as being a DJ, we also hired out our equipment to a guy that used to run Northern Soul Night.
My baby don't care for the shows.
And one track that was really getting popular there was by Nina Simone, My Baby Just Cares for Me.
My baby just cares for me.
But I tipped you off to that one, and they went and got the rights. And it sold okay at the time. It wasn't an earth-shattering one like Jungle Rock.
Cars and races.
The big break for that one came with the Chanel No. 5 TV advert in the late 80s.
My baby don't care for cars and races. My baby don't care for
Chanel No. 5.
And lots of other things they've been involved with, that, very popular Sammy Davis Jr. tracks that are on TV these days. Charly have been good at that. They've all, and they've not really shouted about it.
I gotta be me. I gotta be me. The dream that I see makes me what I am. That far away.
In 2022, I was very pleased to take a call from Charly Records to help them expand. They had been treading water, I think, for a while, still with this brilliant music, but they needed to get on the promotional ladder a bit more because things had changed, online selling, etc., etc. I helped them with some radio ads and getting their name back out there, and they were quickly approaching 2024, which is 50 years of trading, which was great. So we'd got a lot to talk about. So I thought we could help each other.
Just loving you. I
Charly, over the last 50 years, I feel have played a very important role in keeping vintage music alive. Their Northern Soul catalogue is fantastic, and it's been such an incredible experience to be able to go through their back catalogue and find some of those sort of old, forgotten gems.
They'd already been in Northern Soul. They dipped their toes in the water on many occasions, come up with some great projects. Rare Soul Uncovered in particular was a good one. And they'd released a lot of 45s and CDs.
I never planned on being in the music industry. It was an answer to a prayer, you know, and Tina was that answer to that prayer. When I recorded these songs and I was just this young girl, I had been in this abusive teen marriage and I had 2 children. I knew nothing about the world. I was really quite innocent, but I was strong. The thing about me that I'm promoting and everything at the moment is due to the release of my autobiography, Soul Survivor. So it's all about my life, surviving the industry in my life, and it's just like amazing that this music has survived as well.
The next step was a podcast, which was born out of Northern Soul and Soul Time, of course, Shirley Ellis. So the Northern Soul Time podcast was born, and the idea was to try and cover the full history. Let's get the pioneers in front of camera. Some of them unsung heroes, like David from Soul City, David Nathan, who not a lot of people knew. But I think after our podcast with David, which was the first one, we learned so much about not only him, but the reason why he was involved in Soul City. I don't want to get too much into the episode. Please see it, because it's a great one.
Hi, this is KEV Roberts, the host of Northern Soul Time, and I am honoured to be in the company of one of the pioneers of 60s soul, the British ambassador of soul music, in fact, David Nathan. How are you, David?
I'm great. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me on the first episode to talk about Northern Soul and the origins with Soul City and how that all came about. The real story, no mythologies, just truth.
I've got a Soul City single in my hands here, Major Lance, The Beat, which when I was at school, I was buying that single. Soul City, of course, released music that ostensibly was the music you believed in, that you could sell, be proud of.
Yes.
But you weren't quite ready for hordes of young kids from the north of England to come hurtling down, asking you for some of the songs that you released. So they became Northern Soul hits, but they weren't. That wasn't your intention, was it?
Not really, Kev. To give a little more history to it, Soul City as a record shop began in a conversation, just so people know a little bit about the history of how this all came about. So after Dave Godin had been running the Tamil Emotional Appreciation Society, he started something else called the Friends of Rhythm and Blues Society, which was called FARBS. That was the next part of his journey, and he enlisted my support for that. At that time, I met him originally because I was the founder of the Nina Simone Appreciation Society, and he was the one who gave me the blessing, in a sense, because he was like the godfather of all the fan clubs, which were 64, 65, around that time period. So if you wanted to start a fan club, you didn't have to go to get his permission, but it was nice to have him on board. By then, I had started to get into my own journey of soul music, so to speak. And at some point, Dave realized that what he was doing with the Friends of Rhythm and Blues Society and Rhythm and Soul USA was not really going the way he'd like it to have gone. So I remember we sat in his study in Bexley Heath 139 Church Road. And he said, well, I've got this idea. He said, well, why don't we, you have the experience of having, ordered records, you know how to do all that part of it, and you know how to do all that. And says, so why don't we get some money together to start a record shop? The thing that made Soul City different from the other record shops, so there are other record shops that sold R&B, of course, but that made it really different is that we had imports. We imported records, I think, probably every week. To begin with, it wasn't every week. And we had these people in Florida, Mr. and Mrs. Shapiro. And the instruction was, send us some new releases, even on little labels we might not know about.
Yeah.
But there were certain labels that we knew were the ones that would always have, could be relied on to produce new records. So we had Atlantic, we had OK, which was, of course, part of the whole CBS Columbia network.
Yes.
OK Brunswick. So certain labels, we didn't care who the artist was.
Yeah.
Well, obviously we knew certain artists' name value, but we just said, send us a couple of copies of everything. So we get the big shipment. David goes to the airport, get this paperwork out. We get the shipment. And then a lot of times we look up, they don't even know the labels. I mean, I can remember certain labels that stay in my mind. There's a label called Minaret. There was Mirwood, all these labels that were not massive in terms of, they certainly weren't available in Britain. They weren't imported in any great quantity in Britain at that point. And that was what makes Soul City different.
Who were Mr. and Mrs. Shapiro? Were just a couple of people who you met? Or were they music people?
No, they were exporters.
I see.
They exported records from Florida.
Right.
And I think Dave is the one who found them. I don't know how he found them. He probably did some research and found them.
I see.
Maybe there was an added billboard. I don't remember.
Sound like a couple of people who run a sweet shop.
Oh, no. Well, I tell you, and they were, husband and wife, Mr. Raul Shapiro, R-A-U-L, Shapiro, I remember him, and they were excited to be able to supply records to a shop in London. We were lucky to have Nothing Can Stop Me be a big hit.
Yeah.
A hit, actually a big hit,
Yeah.
but it gave us money. All
did.
of a sudden, we got a little money, we have a pop hit, and I do have to say, Tony Blackburn was one of the people who played it on the radio.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was, we thought, oh, good, now we're really doing well, and then we have the first LP and so forth.
Yeah.
But the point I'm making is that definitely the label itself, as you say correctly, some of the releases were absolutely geared towards what had become, again, we didn't, by then it still wasn't called Northern Soul, it's called people, I don't know what we call it. Actually, I've got the magazine Blues and Soul, where the first time Dave mentions it, he doesn't call it Northern Soul, he refers to it as he calls it the groove, the groove up north. That was how he referred to it. In the actual column, he makes some reference to it, but that's the first printed reference to it. And I don't think we didn't call it Northern Soul. I don't know what we called it. We just called it, these are the records people from the North like. And at some point, that's how the term emerged.
And what a genre to have lasted.
I know.
And now it's in every corner of the globe.
I think David Nathan, we salute you, sir, because without those songs, young kids, because remember they're on British labels, so you could afford them. At the time, I think when they were coming out, 1968, 69, I certainly wasn't into them at 68, but I think 69, 70, I was probably, getting 8 shillings together to buy them one at a time. And they were David Nathan choices based on research, because he'd got the Northern Soul interest in his store. And of course, Nothing Can Stop Me by Gene Chandler, as not only the theme tune to Northern Soul Time podcasts, but it was a hit. I remember it on Radio 1 at the time. It wasn't played for very long, but it was very popular. In fact, my science master at my school at St. John's in Mansfield played it. We used to have a disco on a Wednesday night, literally pop and crisps. And again, as I said earlier, we'd hear those regular hits, Tommy James and the Shondells, but in would suddenly, you'd hear Gene Chandler or The Beat by Major Lance. No one knew any different. Happy times. And we are looking very carefully at different stories, because we want to, and not in any chronological order, but we want to set the scene for years to come on how this all started, some of the interesting moments of why records got popular. We are doing a deep dive, but we want to make it as entertaining as possible, because we realise that if you're just coming into Northern Soul, and many over 50s are worldwide, that it is heavy going, because we are dealing with non-hits. So we hope that the ones that have been on the show so far, like David Nathan, he was very much one of the real pioneers with Soul City Records. We spoke about pricing and collecting Northern Soul. No better expert than Tim Brown. We had youth on our side to find out what Northern Soul is like with Jordan Wilson. And we also spoke about AI. Who would have thought we would have ever done a program about Northern Soul and AI? But we did, and Colin Day, an expert, brought in some incredible material and showed us what it was all about. And I think we're all better off for it.
Hi Kev, good to be here in this Charly Temple of Music.
Absolutely. So what's the state of collecting Northern Soul?
Well, obviously, it's never been more viable. Most people will have heard, or many people will have heard, that prices have gone astronomical, gone through the roof, gone into orbit. It's not the whole story, and we'll touch upon that later, but the fact remains, Northern Soul probably has become the world's most viable and valuable musical format.
Let's rewind, but also stay current on prices with the world's rarest Northern Soul record, which you own, and I used to. Tell us about it.
Yeah, you gave me a bit of a break there back in 1989. Yeah. It has to be said, when I bought that off you, and it has to also be said it was £5,000, that was easily the highest price that had ever been
It was.
paid.
It was.
Easily, by some way. So it's okay to rewind and look back with rose-tinted spectacles and somehow think, that wasn't very much money. It was a lot of money at the time. It was nothing to be dismissed very lightly. Of course, now we've got to a situation with that self-same record that we've got here is now worth at least £100,000. In fact, the other copy is being touted at more money than that.
Yeah. Is it the world's rarest Northern Soul record, technically?
Inasmuch as there are two, possibly not. You know, only two known and only two probably ever likely to be found. There's a test pressing. And
yes, there is, yeah.
That's an odd situation in itself. But possibly because the copies were all destroyed, it probably will never, ever be found again.
There's another great version by Chris Clark, which you've got a story behind. Tim.
Yeah, when we found the second copy of Frank Wilson with a gentleman in Detroit called Ron Murphy, who'd salvaged it from an engineer at the pressing plant who'd kept one when he was told to destroy the entire run. And we ended up buying all of Ron's collection, and he was unusual in so much as he was a contemporary of the Detroit music scene, a white guy, and he had actually bothered to accumulate Detroit records and Motown in particular. And amongst all the things we bought off him, not only was there the second copy of the Frank Wilson, he had an unissued test press by the Motown singer Chris Clark, for whom the record had always been intended by Frank Wilson. In fact, when I met Frank Wilson, he couldn't really explain why it ever came to be pressed up on Soul as a promo. He had no explanation for that. He didn't know anything about it.
Wow. What were you buying though initially? What were the songs that you heard that made you go out, start buying, building a collection? Clearly, you weren't hearing, I would think, the rarest records on the planet in a small town. So what were you listening to?
At the very beginning, you don't really know the difference. You just want to own the tunes, and you're not particularly bothered about what label they're on. Not really.
No.
So probably the first record I ever owned was on that shockingly dramatic, plain, white, Out of the Past label, and it was probably Bill Black's Combo and Little Queenie, an instrumental of the Chuck Berry hit.
Because you'd heard it at the local disco?
Because Ginger and Eddie, who were the big local DJs, played it at the Ukrainian club disco, yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, I can remember the first original I ever had was the OJ's Deeper in Love with You, another record you never ever hear these days.
Fantastic.
That still ticks all the boxes for me these days. And gradually you build upon that. And I would also like to say, when I first started paying a little bit of money for records, £3 or £4, and £3 or £4 in 1975 was not the £3 or £4 it is now.
No, of course not.
In fact, I remember buying something for a £5 at Wigan, and my friend Adi saying, "You're crazy." £5 was thought as being that much money.
But people were paying those prices even with the Twisted Wheel, though.
Yeah.
For
but
certain
nonetheless,
titles.
it was still regarded
a lot of money,
as being something.
Yeah.
And a few years later, I paid £25 for something, and it nearly made it to the local paper. It was thought that astounding, crazy. And for me personally, the price and the fact that the records were rare and you couldn't actually just go and get them, they had to be fought over, they had to be acquired, they had to be searched out. The fact that the records were rare was all part of the mystique of staying up all night, wearing slightly different clothing, and being part of a lifestyle that had a lot of unusual aspects attached to it, and that ordinary people, for want of a better phrase, didn't really understand.
First of all, tell us how you got started, because we know you were young because the branding of the Wigan Young Souls, which we'll get to later, but you were very, very young. You're still very young. Tell us how you got started. I mean, you were certainly in the right area for it, weren't you?
Yeah, definitely. Being from Wigan, born, bred Wigan. Everybody thinks that my parents were into it when they wasn't. When I first appeared going to local soul nights and attending all-nighters, I always got that attached to me that, oh, well, his mum and dad were into it and records got passed down. That wasn't the case. It never has been the case. Being from Wigan, it's a funny one, really. When the Grand Arcades, you know, the shopping centre in Wigan. Yeah. So when that was being built, I remember walking through that, and obviously they've got all the memorabilia on the walls and the casino cafe thing, So I remember walking through that with my dad and pointing it out and just being intrigued by what it was. And obviously it's my hometown. I've always took an interest in local history, whether it be buildings, Wigan Pier, music, everything like that. And then I discovered the This England footage on YouTube, and I think for me, especially being a male and somebody who was 13, 14 at that time, to see people expressing themselves and just being able to dance so freely like that, it really interested me. And then from there, I started just attending like the local soul nights, and then got an interest in records, which
is fatal.
Oh yeah. I did get warned about that, you know, but chose not to listen and kind of got a bit obsessive with buying records.
Just show us this, Jordan.
Yeah.
Just hold that up.
So
explain what this is.
So it's a studio acetate. It's the first mix of You Don't Love Me. It's got the different intro on it, and it's a complete different mix as well. It's a really loud mix. You can almost hear every instrument. It's like it's like their multi-channels have not been mastered and mixed correctly yet. But I think, to my understanding, this is the acetate that Bob Palladino sent to Sandbag Records.
Okay.
To try and get them to release it. It is does have his telephone number on it as well,
Yeah.
and his name wrote on it. And then it came also with
the lyric sheet.
Yeah, with the lyric sheet,
Song
which is handwritten
beautiful
as well. Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. What I mean, not only an incredible item, but started in Wigan, and it's with somebody from Wigan.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I bet. Yeah,
which is fantastic.
Yeah, I suppose that's nice, isn't it? This sounds quite cliche to say, but I used to save up my dinner money that my mum and dad would give me, like £3 a day dinner money. And it sounds a bit like a throwback story.
Well, then you wouldn't eat
literally,
for 3 weeks.
Yeah. It's a different story now, like, but yeah. And I used to have little money bags onto my bed to put this money in. Anyway, so when I started collecting original vinyl, and then suddenly you start realising these records are a lot more pricier than your British press, £10-20, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet, Sweet Lovin', the platters on pie and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I heard this record on an old cassette tape, Mixcloud recording, something like that. And I found that Sean Chapman had one for sale on his website. So it was £150. And it took me a while, but I reserved it with Sean, saved up my dinner money, but then realised, how am I going to get this, like, you know, hoard of £1 coins to Sean? So I had to go down and say to my dad downstairs, I said, look, Dad, I said, I know it seems a bit mad, but there's this record for sale. It's £150. I've got all this money that you've actually give to me, and now I'm going to give it you back. Can you please bank transfer, PayPal this money to this guy? So he's like, what? You're not going to find these records, are you, in a charity shop in Wigan Town Centre now? They're not going to be sat there. Like, I think people think from an outside that you're just going to stumble across these records.
Do you look?
I do, yeah. I never find nothing. Because every so often you do hear of that one story.
Is that because all the managers say, if you're looking for singles, by the way, Jordan Wilson was in yesterday?
Probably, yeah, maybe, yeah.
How did it all get started, AI, with you?
Well, the songs came first. I think that's the important thing, Kev. And we can get into the background of the songs. I can't speak for the whole of AI, but I know how I'm using it to make a serious, sincere, and I hope above all respectful attempt to recreate the sounds of 1960s soul music. And I think we're at the beginning of an AI revolution. People are understandably worried about impact on everyday life, and especially on the creative industries. But I find it really interesting. The space I find interesting is where human creativity connects with AI to create something that we couldn't do otherwise.
Because there are people who assume that with a computer reading up on AI software, you're in business. But you've got to have something else.
Well, yeah, I think it's helpful to have a background in music. So I've been producing jingles for years. Emma challenged me to write her a song. And I'd never written anything longer than 30 seconds and never anything meaningful. But I was up for the challenge and had a go. This is several years ago. And then come Christmas, we sat around the Christmas tree. It's all very sort of like the Von Trapp family. I got my guitar out and played the first song I'd ever written. Yeah. And then it just became a thing. I enjoyed the process, the creative challenge of it. So I became an amateur songwriter, if you like, with no intention to do anything with these songs at all.
So the music industry is still assessing AI. One school of thought is that AI-created songs are just one big sample and subject to copyright. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think AI has learnt to make music in the same way that any musician learns, by listening to other music and building on that. Personally, I try and avoid anything that sounds like another record that I may have heard, or another vocalist, for instance.
Yeah.
But I think AI has learnt, just like any musician has learnt, by listening and digesting music that's already out there.
Say how, but I'm sure it's gonna happen, 'cause I'm ready. Yes, I'm ready. And I won't slow down. I want you in lace and satin, 'cause I'm ready. Yes, I'm ready. And I'm gonna wrap my whole darn world all up in you. Do you feel it too? Said I'm gonna
Kev, I only wish I could click a mouse and another Lily Mae Morton pops out, or another Lenny. It's not as simple as that. There's quite a lot of craft goes into it.
Yeah.
First of all, it starts with the song, and I'm a slow writer. I mentioned that these songs were never intended for the public.
Yeah.
They've been private love letters to my wife, which I've written over the course of the past several years. So because I'm only writing 2 or 3 songs a year, I can spend loads of time on them. So typically, to write the lyrics, chords, melody, that's weeks. Once I get into the programming, if you ever want to lose a weekend, start on a Friday night, and next thing you know, it's 3 a.m. on Sunday morning. And
You're taking longer than Phil Spector, sir,
Well,
to make these.
It's not a quick process. The software is brilliant, mind-boggling. It'll give you an infinity of choices, which you can then keep remixing. You can get into microscopic detail on the phrasing of the vocal, and still you've only got 30 seconds. And even then, you might end up trashing it and starting over again. So, yeah, it takes a lot of passion, a lot of patience, and you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find a prince or a princess.
We spoke to the late Ted Massey, who has been a pivotal figure in the West Midlands, just plying his trade, playing rare records. We spoke to record dealer Pete Smith, a very accessible guy. Lots of people not only buy records from Pete Smith, but they ring him for information. They ask him questions because he's been around a long time. So we wanted to explain more about who is Pete Smith. Let's see what's in that magic box, because there is a connection with this next single that Ted is going to show us to our relationship. And here it is. This is a label that's very sought after, of course, all over the world, Shrine. And this was a single that originally belonged to me before I met Ted. And I, at the time, thought, because things were changing in the early 80s, I was still a relic, a leftover from the Wigan era, and it was still very much, I was a Young Hearts man, you know, and Eddie Foster man. So when I heard it, I remember saying distinctly, wow, that's a great soul record. But I didn't think it was a great Northern soul record. So at the time, a fellow from the Mansfield era called Jim Wensiora was actually dating my sister.
Right.
So Jim got into my good graces and started to buy some records from me. And I sold him the JD Bryant. I think it then went on a little bit of a journey on its own. And it ended up with
it went
Ted.
It went when Jim sold up. It went to KEV Darge.
Yeah.
And nobody had. I think Jim had done a few tapes for people, but there was really there was nowhere to hear it.
Yeah.
So I said to Kev, I said, "Can you do me a tape?"
Yeah.
This was, I can't remember, probably 87, 88, and. About 3 months later, I get a phone call, and he says, "Mr. Massey," in his Scottish accent. He says, "Do you want JD Bryant?" I says, "Yeah." I says, "I still want a recording." He says, "No." He says, "Do you want to own it?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yes, I do." So he told me. I knew how much he paid Jim for it.
Yeah.
It was 300 quid, believe it or not.
Right.
So
quite a lot of money though, still in
but
at that time.
And then he said. He said, "You can have the Kairos as well."
Wow.
So I paid $650 for the 2.
Beautiful.
and he gave them to. I paid him, and he gave them to Rob Smith, and I went over to Rob Smith's shop, hoping that he didn't lose the records.
We've
in the
come
shop.
360 degrees. That was my shop,
right?
Originally,
So that record there is the one that if anybody plays JD Bryant
on a reissue,
on a CD, they were all recorded off that record.
Wow.
In Sizedon in Leicestershire.
Wow. So I better touch it one more time because I haven't touched it for 40 odd years. So if Ted Massey decided to sell that record today, what would it cost, Ted?
Somebody's offering me 12,000.
12,000. A pretty decent
And I wouldn't
investment
sell
on.
it.
Yes.
My feelings for me alone was that I was targeted by somebody who they weren't the people who broke into my house and stole the records were employed by somebody to do this,
right?
In the hope that maybe they would stop me from DJing because I wouldn't have the records that I could DJ with,
right?
And that almost certainly that is what I feel.
That's what you
and
believe.
What most of my friends and most of the people who know me believe as well, that's what happened. That they were actually stolen to order, because the guys that broke in they might have been stealing Pericomo records for all they cared. They were paid £3,000 to do the job.
Oh wow.
One of them was actually sent down. The police
so there's been prosecutions.
The police, the police did a good job and managed to follow the ARP cameras and the mobile phone records and followed to this guy's house. The three others involved, names were given, but unfortunately the police weren't able to connect them good enough. The police seem to have so much more. They have to be able to prove something so much more than they ever used to have to do.
Without reasonable doubt.
Without reasonable, they can't just go and arrest somebody now because they can be done for false arrest. So they've actually got to have a real good reason to actually feel the collar of somebody nowadays. So even though I've got the names of the other three people that broke in, there's nothing the police can do.
Sure.
As I said, I was 100% targeted, and so I can't really say any more about the stolen records.
Well, look,
it was just one of those things. So.
Let's hope and pray that there is a happy outcome somewhere. At the moment, he's the most popular Northern Soul record dealer in the land. He's from the West Midlands. Pete Smith is with us. Hi, Pete.
Hello, Kev.
Great to see you.
Yeah, nice
Great
to see you.
We both share our love of football.
Correct.
And
Although
you support one
off
team, I support a team, but we share the same song that they both run out to, which is Hi Ho Silver Lining. Yes.
When did you adopt that?
I have got no idea, but just to tell you something, the guy who co-wrote that, I've met him.
Who is he?
Larry Weiss.
Okay.
He wrote Sweet Happiness for Nubian Johnson, and I Go to Pieces.
Although we do only play that by default because Liquidator's our song, but they banned us. They banned it. So.
But that was Chelsea.
It was Chelsea, West Brom and Wolves.
Oh right.
It's always been, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I found soul music quite boring. I honestly did. At the disco, like they were playing Sex Machine and Band of Gold and all these records, and it wasn't until I heard this particular record at the front here. That I thought, my God, that's different to anything I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And that's when it all started to change a bit for me, to be honest.
What was that record, by the way?
That record, although it's not an original, I have had the original.
Yeah.
But this is what we knew it as.
Yeah.
The Joker, Butch Baker.
Yeah.
Misspelt as the Jocker.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's actually the milestones.
All part of growing up.
Yeah, so
wonderful.
I'm a joker.
While all these nice Philly records and everything were being played, all of a sudden I heard
That
this.
came out.
I'd never heard anything
Yeah.
with a beat like that.
Sure, sure.
I mean, so the backing track's fantastic. The actual laughing and all that's a bit annoying.
Yeah.
But oh my God, I nearly wore this record out.
Yeah.
Now this is at the start of 1974.
Yeah.
And following on from that, we saw things like the Javels and the Wigan Ovation and all this. And then when the lads and the girls from appeared on Top of the Pops dancing to Footsie.
Yeah.
And I think for me and a lot of people at my age, 14, looked at that and thought, what's that? I've got to get involved in that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's exciting.
And I even remember the first record I ever danced to in public because I've been training in the bedroom for weeks, and it was Ghost in My House.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a really strong period, that was.
Yeah, absolutely.
For Wigan
And then
Casino.
everybody in my year at school, more or less, either went to Northern Soul or they put on these RAF long coats and were into Focus and Genesis and Yes.
Yeah.
So it was either one thing or the other.
What was the next level?
Well, the next level, it was at the youth club. The one night, these 5 or 6 lads who we didn't know came in, and they actually gave the DJ their own records.
Yeah.
And they played Girl Don't Make Me Wait, or Bunny Sigler.
Right, yeah.
And they started dancing, and everybody, you know, you've seen it.
Yeah, yeah.
They make
yeah.
a circle.
Yeah.
Watch these lads. Oh my goodness me! They were just like the people who'd been dancing to Footsie.
Sure.
And I thought, God, this is just mind blowing. Tainted Love. I mean, you know, I'd never heard it before.
Yeah.
I managed to get a copy on the next Saturday because it had been, you know,
reissued.
bootlegged. It was at Ruby Red Records.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one, believe it or not, was Love Feeling, Val McKenna. That was
on Spark.
It was a massive record. Yeah. Wombat, I'm Getting On Life.
Yeah.
Johnny Bragg, they're talking about me. That's the first wave of stuff that I...
Sure. Isn't it strange, Pete, that you've mentioned some records there? I think we're fond of all of them in some ways through growing up, but some don't travel very well, isn't it? Odd that Wombat, I remember, I didn't have it at Wigan, so I think maybe Russ played it, and it used to fill the floor. Yeah. But today it doesn't have the same impact at all.
No, it's kind of rock soul hybrid. Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a very strange one.
But if you take something like So Is the Sun, that's still huge. You know, but that was a bit strange.
And the Wombat record was bootlegged 5 times. You know, 5 different pressings.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. I mean, So Is the Sun. Oh, I mean, that gets better and better.
It does.
As the years go by,
does.
doesn't
It's
it?
great, isn't it?
It's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
I never thought there'd come a day where the clothes that we were wearing in 1975 would come back again, and people take it seriously. I mean, the trousers were fantastic to dance in, but nowadays I just don't understand. But and also,
I think that's shrinking though, Pete. Now I think that's starting to wane.
Those trousers were dangerous, right? I'll tell you. Shall I tell you why?
Yeah.
Do you remember the long leather Macs that
Yeah.
everybody used to wear? Well, I was so proud of mine when I got mine when I was 18. It was December 78, I think. And I hadn't got a car. I didn't learn to drive till I was 40. Right, but, got off the bus in the freezing cold, right?
Yeah.
I'd got my baggies on, my long leather, and it was cold, so I put my hands in my pockets, right? And I'm just literally running to my house. And I started to trip over my baggy trousers, right? But I couldn't get my hands out of my pocket of my long leather. So I knew I was going to hit the floor, but I had to choose which side of my face I wanted to land. And smacked on the floor, and I never wore baggy trousers. again after that because they're a danger to life. People think I don't collect American records. I do, but I sell them for a living, so I don't keep expensive ones. I don't mind if I've got a pressing or a bootleg.
Yeah.
Right. This one,
yeah,
Lou Lagland, I travel alone.
Yeah.
I could, if you've got a second, I could tell you a brilliant story of how I got this record.
Yeah.
Right. When I was down in Hastings, and I used to collect, I still do, collect David Bowie.
Yeah.
And I got a friend in Connecticut, Julie, who I used to swap tapes with. And she mentioned she was going to a record fair in New York. And I said, oh, could you have a look for some records for me? Right. So I gave her a little list of records. And she came back. She said, I found your Lou Ragland record. Right. So she paid $1 for it or something.
Okay.
And I said, how much do you want for it? And she says, well, you know where you live in Hastings? I said, yeah. She says, do you know Fairlight Beach? I said, yeah. She says, well, Ashes to Ashes video was filmed there. Could you go and get me some sand from that beach and post it to me, and you can have your Lou Ragland record for nothing?
So that's really what the ideas are about with Northern Soul. That's the backbone of Northern Soul Time. We want to be informative. We don't want to be too bland and boring, but we also want to have a light-hearted look at this very strange world of Northern Soul. And it doesn't get much stranger than characters like Simon Soussan, who is also a subject of one of our podcasts and essential viewing.
There he is.
Kevin.
Hey, brother, how are you?
I'm okay. I met this girl called Sharon.
Right.
And she bore me a child called Hillary. Sharon, I like that name. I like that name. So I think later on I created Sharonette. That's because of her.
That's where the name came from. I see the ex-wife.
Exactly. Sharon, beautiful. No, I didn't marry her. I was just her boyfriend, and she got pregnant, and we had a child.
Right.
I was still married to Margaret.
Right.
And my baby, I didn't want my baby to find out that her mother was divorced, so we let that to happen later, much later. Now, I decided I want to try and produce my own songs, like. Well, I'm in a world of trouble. So I started doing things, and one of them was Papa O Mau Mau.
Yeah.
So I meet this guy called Johnny Pace, which I'm sure you know.
Of course.
And I said,
did old Jackson. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I said to him, can you arrange a song? He said, yeah, what song? I said, the Rivingtons, Papa O Mau Mau. He said, yeah, that's easy. The poor guy arranged it to the T. He played the drums. I played the percussion. And I did the in the beginning of the song.
Yeah.
And I did all the low part of papa, mama, papa. And we recorded it. Listen to this. Wait. And I sent it. For some reason, I think I sent it to Black Magic, to Brian Selby.
Brian and John.
No, actually... No, it was John Bratton that got hold of me, and he said to me, if you have any northern-sounding stuff, send it to us. So I mailed him an acetate of Papa O Mau Mau. He released it. That went top 15.
Yeah.
I remember when I went back to England, listening to Tony Blackburn, he would have his dog bark. Oh, oh. And then he would,
yeah.
And he would play it.
Yeah.
The song went crazy.
Off the top of your head, name your favourite ever Northern Soul songs.
Professionals.
Professionals.
That's why I love you.
Groove City. That's why I love you. Detroit. Yeah.
What
oh
else?
yeah.
What
and
else?
Moses Smith.
Girl Across the Street.
Epitome. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Epitome of sound, of course.
You Don't Love Me.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Oh yeah. Frankie Beverly, if that's what you wanted.
Oh yes.
JD Bryant, Real Humdinger.
Real Humdinger. Yeah. Killer.
Oh my God.
A killer. Yeah.
And what's his name? The guy that sang Love and Desire. I heard on the other side. What's his name?
Oh, Sidney Barnes or Jerry Cook.
Sidney Barnes. Yeah, no, Sidney Barnes. Sidney Barnes wrote that song.
Yes.
And I remember him when he was doing backup with the Parliament. So that song, Don't Be Sore at Me, is one of my favorites.
Brilliant,
Don't
isn't it?
be sore at me.
Lovely song.
My little heart will
Yeah.
surely break. Hey!
Yeah.
And of course, Carl Carlton, I can feel it. Oh,
Yeah, that's a great record. Yeah.
listen to me, Kevin. Listen to the song. Concentrate on what the background singers are doing.
Yeah.
They're going against him.
Yeah.
On the song, they're going totally against him, and it's so smooth.
It is.
I separated the vocalist from the background, and I'm going to send you a copy with just the backgrounds on the track. It is absolutely the most beautiful thing you've ever heard.
Some backbeat.
I can
Yeah,
feel
it's great.
it.
Yeah.
I can feel it in my bone. Oh my God.
And
Carl Carlton.
strangely enough, that's got more popular over the last 20 years. But of course, originally, his big song was Competition Ain't Nothing.
Yeah, that's okay, but I can feel it is just right there. It's in the pocket. You cannot get any better. Oh my God, are you kidding me?
Okay.
Randy Wood. I met him and I said, Randy Wood, aren't you the owner of Mira and Millwood? He said, yeah. Yes, I am. I said, come sit with us. It took him like an hour to finish a pint of vodka. And I said, be careful. So I drove him home. His wife had a fight with him, Mira.
Yeah.
And I said, look, you're going to be part of my entourage. I'll supply you the drinking, but you have to stop at one point. He became part of my entourage for the following 2 years. Then he had a problem with Mira, his wife. One day he comes to me at the studio and he said, Simon, listen, I'm willing to sell Millwood and Mira and some other small labels that I acquired through the years. And I just need 20,000.
Yeah.
I said, are you sure? He said, I'm sure.
I think
At
I
that
remember
time-
seeing the. I think I remember seeing the contract. Do you remember when we met in Detroit with Martin Koppel?
Yeah.
I think you had
Yes.
that paperwork with you that day. I remember seeing
Yeah.
something like that. But that again, sorry to interrupt your story. It's only purely out of excitement because you really took Merwood and found lots and lots of unreleased tracks. But what a great label anyway, regardless of you finding any unreleased tracks. Wasn't it a
It's not
fantastic
bad.
label? Fantastic.
He gives a right. No, Buffy gives him a right to his house. She went into his garage and she pulled out like 200 tapes. I still have them because I paid him 20,000 in cash.
I'll get together with the team here at Charly. They'll work on this production, and then Glenn will get back to you. And as I say, I'm glad we can continue these memories. We'll do it again. God bless you. Best wishes from the United Kingdom. Let's get all this together, and then we'll be back for another portion.
No problem. I'll be there. Don't worry about it. Okay.
Great.
And happy Easter.
You too, my friend.
Give my best to Glenn, who's still crying because I told him that he was not a DJ.
Yeah, no. I will. And you have a pleasant weekend. We're going to be talking again soon, my friend.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Take care.
Take good care.
Bye-bye now.
God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Very exciting times for Northern Soul Time because we are launching in the United States, which is great because hopefully we can play their music and showcase it to them, and they can hopefully like it, which I know thousands do anyway, but we can take it to a much larger stage and they can enjoy some of their treasures that we've discovered for them. We've saved them time. We've saved them half a century. In terms of viewing, you can of course listen and watch on YouTube. And it's great if you've got a smart TV, because if you've got a large TV on the wall or wherever, you can watch it in all its glory, and it's very, very well put together. It's a pleasure. And of course, we're on Spotify as well. Spotify and YouTube for Northern Soul Time. And we've got regular episodes. They're coming up all the time. And I can reveal we've got some really good episodes in the works at the moment that are absolutely mind-boggling. One in particular at Christmas. So stand by for that.
Guess I'll pack up and leave this old town. Sorry you can't stay. My old girl just put me down, and I guess I'll be on my way. On my way. The only thing I had that meant so much to me, I let you get away. People, I'm thankful for your sympathy, but I guess I'll be on my way.
And you didn't mention when he prompted you about the car boot. I thought you were going to go into finding the Beatles.
Oh my God, I forgot.
Yeah.
Did I tell you about that?
What to do? No, you've mentioned it on the stuff. You know, when we get we'll talking about car boot, run it across the bottom. Pete found a Beatles.
I found a 10-inch acetate of Maxwell's Silver Hammer.
Wow.
Alternate cut.
Right.
At Boots in Cornwall in September. And it was amongst the usual Pat Boones and whatever. And I asked the chap where he got it from, and he said it belonged to his aunt. Right. And I said, well, look, he wanted 10 quid for it, right? I couldn't give him 10 quid for it. I'll give him 100 quid for it, right? He says, I can't believe it. Thank you for doing that. He says, I said, here's my email. Drop me a line if you find anything else. He says, I've got the information on that now. He says, my auntie used to be George Martin's nanny for the... Yeah. And George Martin used to give pre-releases. And he said, I've got one for you. I said, what, another one? He says, yeah, it's an LP. It's signed by the artist. I thought, oh, no, it can't be. Yeah, yes, Cilla Black. Oh. it was still all right, it was signed by Cilla Black and George Martin, two one-sided test pressings of a Cilla LP. I thought it was going to be Beatles signed. Yeah. I've not heard from him since. I traded the acetate for 3,000 quid's worth of records.
The man. I love it.